My name is John Rasso. I'm with the Harry Fox Agency in Rumblefish. And today we're going to talk about digital tools of the trade. We have an esteemed panel that covers a broad swath of those things. And I know it's called digital tools, but we also want to very much cover the topic of the human interaction with those things and the responsibilities of all the parties involved, and how we could focus on bettering the royalty collection process, which is the main reason for the existence of these companies. So with that, I'm going to let everyone sort of go down the line, introduce themselves, talk a little about the main mission of their company and their offerings, and then we'll sort of evolve it from there. So starting with Mr. Keith Bernstein from Crunch Digital.
Good morning. I'm Keith Bernstein, founder of Crunch Digital. For those who don't know us, I think our main objective is always trying to facilitate licensing between those who want to use the music, some new idea, and those who own the music, and collections. I'll go into a little bit more about what we do a little later. But real quick question, I want to just ask the room, since our company focuses quite a bit on apps, if anybody out there wants to guess just by number how many apps are in the App Store that actually are classified as including music, or just put themselves down as including music. Any guesses? Any guesses? Nobody cares.
2,000.
20,000.
This is not Price is Right, but
Come on.
20,000 to the man in 10.
hold on. Go up a little higher. I mean, I think there's
50,000?
Keep going.
100,000.
Too high.
I asked this question, how many apps are in the store? We're thinking 5 million?
All right, so we're going to end this right now. We're going to end the suspense. There's over 50,000 apps that utilize music somehow. And just to tie it in with what Crunch Digital does, our focus is to try to get those people to understand, just like on the digital service side, hey, you're using the music and you have to pay too. And John and I were just chatting a minute ago saying, well, his client list is X number of people, and ours is X number of people, and other people have X number of people. Maybe collectively we have, 1,000 clients. You start doing the math on how many apps there are that none of us are working with. There's a lot more money to get out there from those stores. So who said 50,000 was, okay. So Aaron gets the Crunch Digial, our new
No
logo.
one's gonna
has
ever
been
see me
unveiled.
wear that.
Aaron gets the t-shirt.
Cheers, thank you.
So Keith, besides making T-shirts, what's the main focus? What you do is, right? You have your
catering business.
Yeah, I'm saying, but the connection here is that you license, you provide licensing for these companies.
Okay, I wasn't going to bore everybody. With
I'm sorry. I was going to touch on the base to give a general idea.
I appreciate the opportunity for the infomercial. Basically, our focus has been working with apps and startup apps to try and hold their hands, to explain to them, like, you can't use the music like you're planning to use the music, or give them good guidance, and then bring them to labels and publishers kind of educated to what they should expect, and give them an opportunity to prove themselves out. We launched something late last year actually, but earlier this year as well. Crunch Digital has a new service called Digital Music Sandbox. And the idea behind the sandbox is we're giving apps an opportunity to get going with some music and prove themselves out. Otherwise, they're just going to use the music anyway. But I can tell you more about that later because I don't want to use up time.
Thank you, Keith. Chris McMurtry with a new company really to our industry, but a company that's been around for some time, Exactuals. Yes. As I stumble over that.
No, thanks, John. I'm Chris, head up music products for Exactuals. We have, Exactuals is a payments company, so we like to make sure people get paid. And we have two products. One is Payment Hub, and see several folks that use the product here. Thank you. And Payment Hub provides a portal for the payer, so you guys that are doing the paying, as well as a portal for the payee. And then our second product, if you're going to be in payments, it's kind of important to know who to pay, and to do so accurately. So our second product is called Ray, or royalties.ai. Ray uses machine learning and entity resolution to match disparate sets of data. And so our most common use case is matching master recording and publishing information.
Great, thanks. And Joe Conyers, the resident New Yorker, or the other New Yorker here. We got people from out of town with Song Trust.
Hi, I'm Joe Conyers. I'm the founder of Song Trust. We work with over 20,000 music publishers as a royalty collection platform. We work with publishers like Downtown Music Publishing, Sub Pop, big YouTube channels like Trap Nation, and we help people collect from all around the world. You'll also learn about our digital collection in Europe later on with ICE services. We also work with over 150,000 songwriters, and our collection network spans everywhere from Australia to most of Europe, and about 43 different collection societies, royalty administrators like Harry Fox and Slingshot, MRI, Crunch, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Joe. And at the end, we have Aaron with Exploration.io.
Yeah, so I'm CEO and co-founder of Exploration. We are typically called upon by publishers and artists, writers, artists, and labels once they've reached a point in their career that their media is beginning to get proliferated around the web in the world. And we help them compile the metadata that they need to compile in order to get paid. So in the absence of a central database or a GRD, global repertoire database, our belief is that an entity needs to have a powerful way to compile and store and manage their catalog such that they can deliver that to the parties that need it, whether it be Harry Fox or the PRO or a label or a production company for sync placement, whatever the case may be, to be able to really, really quickly deliver that. And so it needs to be clean, it needs to be formatted in a particular way, and yeah, and one needs to have agency and control of that. So that's what Exploration does.
Great, thank you, Aaron. And I should explain, the Harry Fox Agency has been around for 90 years. We have traditionally been representative of music publishers and have created a huge database that we've now been able to use for our Rumblefish service. I know you had mentioned Slingshot, that was our branding, but after our acquisition by CSAC, we rebranded as part of Rumblefish, and we provide content ID services for YouTube, as well as administration for really big apps, DSPs like Spotify and Apple and 7 Digital. So very similar to it with Keith was saying as far for the sandbox model, or our sandbox is pretty much the entire publishing copyrights for 20 million copyrights right now. So the main focus, and I think that while we work with all of these companies in various different ways, the key focus is trying to get us clean data, complete data, since the universe of a Spotify or an Apple is pretty much everything that there's a sound recording in existence for. So that's our main goal, is to try to get that clean and accurate, and these tools help us do those things and makes those exploitations of sound recordings with our copyrights in them accurately paid. And there's quite a few of those things, and they grow every day. Some of these, these digital tools of the trades have helped facilitate the ability of someone who really has no knowledge of copyright or administration, unlike the experts in this room. And now that's opened a door, and essentially their capabilities have gotten beyond their knowledge of how to do it. So now we're trying to bring everybody into compliance.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you.
All I was going to say was that I think you hit it right there at the end, that in the services we work with, and the sandbox is just one element, but in my experience throughout having this company, is that those who are going to pay royalties typically underestimate what's involved, whether it's a digital service, an app. I meet with these tech guys, and they have probably built a fantastic app that you just look at and it starts playing the song that you were thinking about, but they can't understand and comprehend song shares, splits, reporting different people. They all think it's a push of the button, and John probably experiences what I experience, which they think it's a push of a button when you're doing the reporting all the time. And the biggest problem is that almost all these services, I don't even care how big you are, they employ people that in the past didn't come from record labels or publishers or royalty trenches. They just hired people, just figuring if they staff up, they can do it. They just can't. And whether it's a company like us or HFA or MRI or somebody else, I really think the right trend, and who knows what happens with this collective that's being talked about, you have to remove the back office reporting element from all of these guys. Digital services, apps, I don't care who it is. I think it needs to be a marketplace where under the licenses, and this is the suggestion part, under your licenses with whoever comes to you to ask to use your music, I don't think there's any reason why you can't tell them as part of the license that it's a requirement that you have to work with an authorized vendor. Give them a list of 4 or 5 companies. Let the 4 or 5 companies compete on their own for price or customer service, whatever it is, to win somebody over. But I think you'd be doing the marketplace a big service by telling them, look, you can use my music. And the thing is that I can't rely on the kindness of strangers that you're actually going to report to me, and I don't think you're going to get it done. And by the way, if you show me your business plan, where does it say royalty system? Where does it say royalty people? It doesn't. So I would encourage publishers, large and small, and I know a lot of the big publishers now often tell people, you got to work with one of these companies because we don't want to audit you, we don't want to chase you down, we just want to know that it's getting right. So my suggestion is, no matter who it is and what company it is, that you should start thinking about putting in your deals, removing the reporting obligation or the ability for them to report, and put it in the hands of a vendor you trust.
Yeah, no,
I can't agree more with that. To the extent I meet CFOs of tech startups and they think that, oh, it's just accounting. Yeah, well, it's like 700 level. Like, this is PhD level royalty accounting, right? This is not easy accounting. This is multi-territory with multiple owners and an ownership structure that changes constantly and more so day by day. And in order to really own the global picture, you need a specialized company handling this for you.
Yeah, I agree, but at the same time, I think we have an audience here of music publishers, and I think there's a responsibility on our side to get the data in order, and I think that's what a lot of these companies focus on, is getting so someone wants to pay properly, but it becomes a challenge of who owns and who controls, and that's where I think the individual, the role of the publisher, I think, is rather identifying talent, finding the creative, working on the creative and the opportunities out there. And then there's this back office administration, which really defines the sizes of a lot of these organizations. There's some people that have IT staffs and some people that are just one person. And that's where I think interacting with all these different companies is a way to facilitate it and know what the end of the day is. We don't know what songs you have until you tell us. And so working with these different companies. So I wanted to ask Aaron, so you actually work, your company started as Content ID, and now your focus is about really cleaning data. Right. You've provided cleaner files to us. And so that's been successful. So you could talk a little about that process?
Sure. So, like I said, we are called on to help specifically music publishers compile, augment the data that they need in order to get paid. And so what we do is and this is recommended that anybody can do this. This is what we do, and the other folks that are here do this as well. But what we suggest for folks to do is to pull all of the data that they need, all of the data that they can find together, and then create what we call a flat file. So you're pulling it from your HFA information, your HFA code, maybe from your PRO information, the codes from YouTube, ISWCs, your International Songworks code, where your compositions are bedded into ISRCs, and bring all of that data together and compile it into what, like I said, what we call a flat file, so that you've got the authoritative record of your catalog. And then once that is compiled and clean and formatted, then you can distribute that to the parties that need it, whether it be YouTube or Harry Fox to collect from all of the places that they collect from.
Thanks. Joe, you've built a really great interface for publishers. You deal a lot of that. At least initially, the company started with the DIY artist to bridge that gap.
And small publishers. Publishers are just getting started, 3, 4, 5, songwriters, and we've expanded into really addressing much larger publishers. And we work with any sort of file you send us. We can generally enrich it with metadata, take it from hopefully a relatively good standard, maybe even from your company, and take the standard in and then send it around the world. One of the big things we did early on was spend a lot of time thinking about what is the simplest way to get data from DSPs and take the ISRC from the DSPs. So we actually have an interface that you can go in, you add your composition, you tell us about your ISWC if you have one, you tell us about your songwriters, their IPI numbers, we validate those IPI numbers against what is at the societies, and then we make it really simple for you to just search on Spotify and click at the recordings of yours. So for example, one of our clients is One Direction at Downtown, and we have over 700 ISRCs for Story of My Life. And so we've had our team go in and basically click, that's a cover, that's a live performance, that's a remix, that's another YouTuber doing a great version of it. And we've been able to take those and then deliver those to John's company and to all the others around the world to ensure that the money actually comes out of the various powers that be.
Great. Yeah, actually, you touched on something there too about the human interaction with the technology, and I wanted to. Chris maybe could chime in on this too, but the concept of the data is only as good as what we initially get, and so it's cleaning that and keeping that orderly so it can go through the system properly. I mean, right? As you know, ultimately, it's a very simple. This has a number and this matches to this number, and they're connected, and we go and we search the world for those instances. But to get to that point is pretty challenging at times.
You mean the data isn't cleaned if we put it in the blockchain?
I'm not touching that one. That is not one of the topics today. That'll probably be most every other topic today. But,
No,
please.
to your point, John, thank you. You know, what we found is that human beings aren't very good at creating data. You know, and, you know, we talk about, you know, a data standard. Well, we've accounted for over 30,000 standards. Isn't that insane to think about? Like, so which of these are we going to hit? Which of these are we going to deliver to? And so, you know, that human interaction, you know, Joe, with what you were talking about, like those decisions that are being made by people, that's what needs to be added to a system that, that uses machine learning and can to account for these different standards. And then if it's going to Spotify and it's one standard, you know, it gets delivered there. Or if it's coming the other direction, Apple has a different standard, right? You know, so how to account for those anomalies is extremely important.
Well, talk a little bit, Heidi. When we were speaking before, you had mentioned that you actually have musicologists that
We do, yeah. So we, I'm a classical composer, and so we kind of started with, I guess, inadvertently the hardest problem first, and cleaning metadata to meet Apple's very strict standard for classical data. And that is actually how we got into entity resolution and matching, except we were matching not just at the entity level of writer, publisher, artist, but all the way down to the character level. So if you can, you know, for release, for example, that should have an umlaut over the U. So matching when it recognizes, hey, this is for release, is composed by Beethoven, replace that U with the one with the umlaut. And so by writing those rules and making the machine learning very robust, it actually, for the ISRC example, you know, being able to match to those 700, assuming that, you know, there's somebody on the other end that's like, yep, yep, yep. Well, that gets updated and applied everywhere else, right? And then matching that to the writer and publisher. So I think that's a huge piece of that.
Just to go back to something I said a few minutes ago, let's think about if the data was perfect. Let's think about if the data got updated every second, and as soon as administration changed, everything was perfect. I still don't trust a lot of the services to get it right. So I think even if the data is perfect, even if it's updated and completely accurate, I still believe that the right model going forward for better collections is to have that back-end reporting being done by a company that you feel has integrity, has trust, and get the job done. I would also caution you to work with those that overpromise and underdeliver. You know, I think that the right way to move this, again, is just give it thought and talk to me later in the day, because I can tell you how it's working, where on these licenses with publishers, where they're inserting that they have to work with a different company, they have to work with a particular company, they're seeing better revenue flow. They're not even thinking so much about audits. To me, it's the right model. And, you know, like I said, when the collective, when that comes around, should it come around, you know, it'll do its job, but there's going to be a lot of other types of licenses that are going to require some other companies to do it as well.
Yeah, that collective really only covers compulsory licensing, and you know, half the apps I imagine of that 50,000 have some sort of sync licensing component, are way outside of
Lyrics,
no.
tablature.
There's not going to be 50% licensed in that group.
Yeah.
You know, maybe 10% of them are licensed, because, like I said, John and I were talking, and you know, we're just comparing notes on how many people his team might talk to. I mean, I see my friends from not Slingshot, not Rumblefish over there. If we collectively add up the number of folks we talk to each week and each month, we're not getting to the 50,000 or 75,000 figure of the apps. There's a lot of them that are just doing what they do. Now, John asked a question to me. I'm going to let him try to answer it now. So I don't know if he has an answer. He says, well, what are the apps all doing there if they're not licensed?
Well, there was just the element of who should be policing it, right? So this becomes the conversation of everyone. There's a little bit of passing the buck of who's responsible, and essentially we all are. But there's various gatekeepers of, you know, if you find something illegal in a store, who's responsible? Obviously, we had the YouTube conversation which became, you know, the law determined it wasn't YouTube themselves. It was, you know, it's when we put data in, we're taking responsibility for it.
And these guys can't do that. They can't hide
No,
behind it, yeah.
well, no, I understood.
Yeah.
This comes back to it's become much easier to make an app, right? But it doesn't mean you're knowledgeable of the law, right? So where does that get enforced? And that's where you know, all of us have our opportunity to sort of track it down and figure it out. I mean, I know you're sort of leading the question of whether or not Apple should have some responsibility to that, but that's certainly part of the conversation. You know, where does the platform? That's been an argument of safe harbor for a while.
Yeah, it's always a
you know.
safe harbor DMCA question.
So,
But
Yes,
isn't there somewhat of a responsibility on behalf of rights holders, administrators, to establish some sort of threshold under which they're going to go and get licensing? I mean, out of that 50,000 that are on the platform, how many of them are making material?
well, it doesn't.
How many of them are making?
Wait, what difference does it
Yeah,
make?
you can't have the conversation of
Yeah.
like how far over the speed limit are you allowed to travel? That's a very, I think, a legal conversation.
No, hold on. I mean, I like you, Aaron.
Good.
And you've been to my office and we've chatted. But let me just tell you that one really rubbed me wrong. And I'll tell you why. I have a lot of clients who spend a lot of money building out their apps. And I've seen a guy cry when another app came out a few years ago doing exactly what his does. Okay, they loaded up with music. They took every customer he probably could have had. Okay, they ended up getting a lot of funding, that other company. Our guy died. And so the fact that you'd
What does that
have
have to do with the fact that
because
one
none of them
they
should
might-
be up there just getting away with it.
Yeah, I think Aaron was saying in the spirit of reality of.
This is just the spirit of this conversation.
No, I know. Look, I'm moderating. That's literally moderating.
Yeah, well, I mean, but like, but I mean, like,
gonna
for
switch seats.
YouTube, for instance, right? So you've got a platform where literally hundreds of hours of new media are added every minute, right? And there has to be some threshold. I mean, for some folks, it's like I want every single video that's on the platform that contains my copyright taken down, and then other folks are like, well,
Just to qualify, it was only talking about the apps in the App Store.
Yeah.
What you're saying, I'm not going there. I'm just talking about the apps.
Okay, but I think I think it's applicable because there are, out of that 50,000, a vast majority of them have 8 downloads. And does it make material sense to devote resources and humans and
Yes.
capital
Well-
to get a license if they've got 8 downloads?
What's more interesting about that is Apple will take your app down because it looks funny or copies one of Apple's
Right.
icons or something like that. In fact, we had the very interesting circumstance where the Surrey logo somewhat looks like our logo, and they took down our app. But they can't take an 8 download music store or a kind of quasi unlicensed service down. I mean, it begs the question of whether or not, they're obviously watching their own liability here and saying, well, we assume they're licensed, I guess, is their position.
Well, there's challenges about like the copyright law needs to be modified. We always used to work in a business where you can't exploit it unless it's licensed. It happened, but the things worked out at the end, right? We would the money would flow maybe a little later, and now we work in a world where it's the DSPs who are farther away from the creation of the music, so the connection's not there, and there's this, we now have this ability with, to track every single click and so our expectations become higher for compliance. Totally understand that, but at the same time, it's much easier to get the exploitation into the marketplace before those things take place, right? There does become a reality challenge of, okay, there's 70 million sound recordings out there, but only 15 million are getting used. But the law says that those other unused things are just as exploitive as something that someone's pocketing the revenue.
Sure.
Right? You're saying because there is no revenue. So this has been a conversation and really a sea change in how copyright owners have to think about things with safe harbors. And so that's where I want to come back to the conversation of these digital tools help fill that gap. Right, and this is where I go about my point being that I think we have a responsibility to make sure that it's not a big challenge to get it right, because you don't want finger pointing. It's like, well, I'm asking you to do the impossible and you haven't done it, right? And so I think that's where we all win here as far as cleaning the data. Then we have a much purer sense to go out and say, well, look, we're in order. You need to get in order too.
Historically, that's been a big thing we've done over the last 7 years is take a huge swatch of the long tail and bring it into the system, getting their rights properly managed and maintained and properly, set up where the DSP doesn't have to worry about these millions and millions of songs that may have 750,000 streams or 500,000 streams or 14 streams, but they know they're going to be able to license those now because of our service and others like ours.
And how do you know Apple and other DSPs aren't working on a solution? The thing is you have to have this problem in order to have a solution, right? And one thing I hope we don't do is, like at a lot of conferences, is point the finger at whoever's not here, right? Is
there anybody from Apple here?
Well, I was at Apple for 9 years, so that's a bit why I'm peeved at where this is headed. But what's great about technology is interoperability, and I feel like that each of us have APIs and each of us have the ability to work together. And at Apple, our number one rule was make it easy to do the right thing. And I see them continuing to do that. I see Spotify doing that. Content ID is a huge problem with YouTube, and the thing is that consumption has been through the roof because of these DSPs, because of this technology. And when you look at these large tech companies, music is a loss leader for them. Why would they put all the trouble in unless they genuinely care about it? At least that's been my experience.
What did you say about goods and manufacturing? What?
With
Like
goods?
phones and all the other stuff? I mean, isn't that where the money is?
Well, that's why it's a loss.
Yeah, I know. I just want to emphasize that.
Yeah.
That
They're still making money.
But even if it's a loss leader, the onus should be on them.
And what I'm saying is I find that the onus is on them as when we continue to cooperate, and work with them and make open APIs that they can interact with. The biggest problem I've seen is not that there's a shortage of solutions, but where does the onus lie in terms of who's paying for the solutions and whatnot, that's again I think that's why open APIs are really important, is make them easy to use, and if the contribution is coming from all parts of the supply chain, then that's how it gets better.
Well, so Chris, to sort of bring it back to the practicality of it, talk about how a publisher would interact, how the access to your tools.
Yeah. So what, in terms of our tools, I don't think a publisher should pay for Ray. I don't feel like the onus is on the publisher or necessarily the label, for that matter, on the master side. What we found is that it's the distributors that are wanting to pay for Ray, because Apple is dropping the hammer saying, hey, you've got to send us this information, right? And so one of two things could happen. It could be like, all right, label publisher, we're not going to distribute your music unless you provide us this information, and you've got to pay for this technology to clean it up. Or the distributor can say, hey, we have 40 people that are manually doing this, and let's see if there's a technology that can make it easier for them, and we can use that great talent elsewhere within the company and whatnot.
So so once again, where's your data sources from? Sound recordings are out there, but publishing is one of the more challenges. We have a history of sort of holding it close. And so how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, so that's another reason why I don't think the payment Ray should cost the publisher money. Was because you're publicly available data, right? You know, like that Max Martin was a writer on Shake It Off, right? That is added to the database that Ray is using. And so otherwise, we don't have access to the information. We do have some great partnerships with some PROs that are contributing their information. But what we're looking is for those to share that information so that, you know, it makes each of these technologies better, so that you get paid faster, so that we can pay people better using Payment Hub. You know, so.
So, Joe, what is working directly with publishers and obviously downtown, and what have been sort of the challenges that come up over and over again that I guess maybe that are probably more surprising to us?
Or maybe not surprising.
Yeah.
You know, there's the barrier entry to go from being a tiny publisher to a small publisher is pretty great. And we found that, you know, generally until you're making north of $2 million of royalties, it's really not worth investing in technology and software, and instead going to third-party services or doing a joint venture with a publisher or doing a sub-publishing agreement might be a better option from an economics perspective and a focus perspective. And our service is really geared towards that, and we've also made it so as you do go north of that 2 million or so in royalties, we can reduce the amount of territories we manage for you as you can start to acquire that software or build your own systems or bring in your own team. Generally, we've seen that people go from text messages to emails to Excel spreadsheets to an Access database to a file maker, or, you know, or something like that, and then eventually they'll jump into more either building their own systems, working with another kind of technology vendor. But oftentimes now we're just seeing people that can generally work with us through, you know, the whole life cycle of their company until maybe they're so big that they can, you know, have a large technology team in-house.
Well, that's what I wanted to mention. Like Chris was saying about who's responsible, but it depends on what services I think are being provided too, right? Now, when it gets down to that data now has to be delivered different places. There's essentially it's a cost that either you could keep in-house, right? But then you have to fulfill it. This is my mantra this year has been: don't forget what DIY stands for. You actually have to do it, right? You have
to do the work.
And so there's that. But you could and then just you would engage different people at different levels as far as I can do this all myself. They could deliver straight to HFA, and as a result, we could do. They need a little more assistance, or you purchase time by having another service that's able to do that, and that time is probably more valuable to go out and find more acts or get more sync placements, right? So I think everyone has to think through their cost model of their business.
And that's where we found that, you know, we take a 15% fee. You can just go online and join our service at any time. And you can do this stuff yourself. You're just going to spend a body or two in your company as you go from, you know, 10 to 50 to 500 to 2,000, 5,000 copyrights. And you're going to find your team's going to be spending way more time on that stuff than actually having real earnest conversations and creative conversations with your clients and songwriters. And you're not going to be pitching for sync as much. I see it all the time. We see folks that are, you know, have 2-3 founders in a small publishing company, and they say, you know what? For what it's worth, I'd rather not have a $45,000 publishing administrator to work for here, because I could just use Songtrust to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And you know, we can access a much broader global network than you'd be able to do. I mean, I filled out hundreds of hours of paperwork, hundreds of hours I'll never get back in my life to get a setup around the world. And those are hours you could be building your catalog and acquiring new copyrights and working with creating great art.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Aaron, so you and your clientele sort of runs the gamut too, from the DIY artist up to bigger independent publishers. So do you find the same scenario where it's you know, the capabilities vary, and does that sort of impact how you do your build your tools, I should say?
Sure. So what we have found is that, as Joe was saying, is that folks are best equipped to go out and sign writers, facilitate creative conversations, not necessarily compile and organize metadata. And so these standards that we've talked about are pretty easily accessible, or the most of them. But the actual work that it takes to compile that metadata, to continue to find the various apps and the various videos that exist in the world that might contain your copyrights, is a significant challenge. And so, yeah, that's what we're called upon to do. Whether it's a person that's relatively new to the business and had some success, or it's a major, it's the problem exists across the board.
One of the other things is the more sophisticated people who are, the licensors, they don't want to deal with the baby publisher because it's going to take them more time to explain how to get their metadata into their system than it would to be just make it profitable for both of them. And thusly, that's why your company obviously exists, and your company and other aggregators exist, because they just can't afford to deal with those hand-to-hand conversations. Whereas if you're just a rights holder, you really should be maximizing all the licensing activities you can do. Joining an aggregator or working with services to make it easier so you can do that things is just going to make your life a lot easier, and you're going to be able to exploit your works more quickly.
John and I, when we spoke on the phone, and I don't have an answer for this one, we were both talking about, I won't say their name. So a client of ours did a deal and did a license with a new publisher, and we hadn't worked with them before, and we sent out the data request, and we were told that it would be over 30,000 Word doc pages, and we told them we couldn't ingest that. And it was tabbed over and a mess, and I was at a loss with what to do.
We'll take that data. Exploration will.
Well, here's the thing.
We'll take it however you got it. If you got a picture, a photograph of liner notes,
well,
we'll
there
take
is
that
a
data
business
and
opportunity
compile it.
out there.
That's part of what we do.
Because I know a lot of the, some of the publishers don't have, enough people on board. This one certainly did have enough people on board. They didn't do it. But I think there is a step in the process that's needed, and maybe Aaron, you're the guy, or Joe, or somebody, but there are a lot of publishers out there. When we talk about data and getting data and knowing who owns what, there are many of them that, I've seen some very interesting things. I don't know what they were thinking or drinking or smoking when they put that document together, where they made columns and they tabbed it over in the Word page with their percentages. But there needs to be a tool. Somebody's got to have something that could help somebody with a decent-sized catalog, get it in the right format.
There's always going to be the garbage in, garbage out problem.
Yeah, there's unfortunately you try fingerprinting, and this goes back to at some point there needs to be a human that gets it at least close enough for a machine to figure it out, right? The machine's only as smart as we are.
There's a notion of forensic publishing out there, I think.
Yeah.
You really have to think about, sometimes you just have to go back to the contracts and read them and determine vis-a-vis the schedule and have a data entry person add those songs. And is it going to be worth for every catalog? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And it's going to be worth for maybe 5 songs in certain catalogs like that. And maybe that's all you need to do. It is a power law, unfortunately, in this world. And I have seen that there are labels and publishers out there that's their business model, is to go buy really dirty catalogs, clean them up, do the work, and it's a good business for them.
Yeah,
and
you find a lot of money by
you can, you can find extra money, and unkept catalogs can be a great treasure trove for a lot of publishers. But sometimes it's literally just sitting with the estate owner. I mean, we just found an estate that was in such shambles, and we had to find the gypsy cousin and get him to sign a piece of paper, and then they give you the metadata, which is paper, and it's just work. And sometimes that's worth it, sometimes it's not. But even getting that into an Excel spreadsheet is the first step. But then enriching that data using your service or my service is really the next crucial step. And then let alone hoping you can deliver that data in the right format to the various powers that be.
Yeah, agreed. So, so with that, I mean, Keith, to sort of talk a little more about how do we help the apps become more compliant? At Rumblefish, we have an opt-in agreement portal. I'm sure you have something similar where we go out and we actually try to get them to go. You don't fall in a 115, so it's not a statutory. You can't deal with it with NOIs. So we sell the service at least to exploit the direct deals out there. And I know you're very much involved in that process. Do you get engaged in going out to the apps? Because you're talking about having the publishers, in order when they grant the direct deal, to have a professional administrator involved.
In many cases, we brought the app to the publisher.
Got it.
In those cases, but What was the question?
Well, I'm saying the question was, we're talking about policing it, right? You were saying how there's all these out there, and there's the challenges.
It's not really hard because the apps many of them are so anxious to get their name out there that, you know, you open up your email in the morning and there's 10 new ones who've put their name out there to say they're doing what they're doing, and it doesn't take much to kind of triangulate who's involved and what are they doing and do a little outreach and find out whether or not they're covered, or place a phone call to somebody and say, hey, by the way, they're playing one of your greatest hits. Do you have a license with them? So we don't do a lot of hardcore policing in terms of like a shakedown, but we absolutely, you know, when we hear about them, I just find it very interesting for the apps out there that do a lot of press without licenses, and I'm thinking, like, you realize you just put a spotlight on yourself. I hope you understood what was coming. Or the apps that will say they just got $10 million, and then they want to go into their discussions and plead poor. So there's plenty of them out there. I think we just stay busy with what's on the surface. But I just do keep my eye on a little bit what I was expressing before, is that I see so many of them that they're probably add up to nothing on revenue. There are a lot of clutter.
Well, I mean, but it also goes back to your point too. Is like, if I'm opening a supermarket, I have to stock it, right? I haven't made a single sale yet, but I have to pay for what's available. So your music. So I agree with that. But I think that frequently these conversations come back to, I think, I don't think the apps are. I think they're just an ignorance, right? They're not aware that, even in some cases, they'll go and they'll license the sound recording and aren't aware that there's another copyright in there that they have to pay for. And so I think that's also kind of part of the sales pitch out there, is go, you know, do you understand you're violating the law? You know, so I agree with you, but I think that bluster of, we've just raised $10 million, and you know, that I don't think it's a negotiating tactic on their part.
I think there's plenty out there who get it, and there's plenty out there who
Sure.
don't get it. And,
pleading ignorance is not a...
Yeah, there's a big pot. I mean, we did actually have an interesting one that we resolved about a year and a half ago. Came across a company. They literally thought it was like some instructional app. They literally thought the PRO license was good to go, and it covered them. And they really thought this, and they had made a lot of money. And I told them that there's going to be like a major uprising, you know, against you. And they were successful in getting their licenses done once they realized they should have gone to the publishers. But what's also, I tell a lot of apps, is that I bet you it would cost you less to get licensed now before you get going than to do what you want to do and generate revenue and use all the music, because it's going to cost you more later. So you have to make that decision as well.
There's a question over here.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask the gentleman, I think it's Joe, the second.
Is it Joe?
You say that you compile all the data and then you send it around the world. To whom are you sending it, and do they want all the data, or are you selectively taking what they say they want from you?
So we take in the composition data, and then we add recordings and link those to the compositions. And then we deliver those to various CMOs, the kind of societies around the world. We also work with services directly, like YouTube and Facebook and Musical.ly and others. We also work with the Harry Fox Agency, Crunch, Music Reports Inc., Louder, MediaNet, those companies that work with DSPs to actually pay out their royalties. So we're making sure that you're set up properly at those various places, so that if there is money from various licensing happening, we'll make sure we get it for you.
So are you originating information, or are you checking what they have against your database?
We're delivering them the information. If there's data already there, it will either say there were a co-publisher on there. Maybe the co-publisher didn't submit the complete data. Our data will merge with that data and enrich that data, because hopefully you'll have added proper ISRCs around the recordings. We also will work, if there are split disputes, to manage the process there and try to work with all the parties that be to try to confirm the splits. So generally we are accretive to the data. We're adding additional data rather than just sending partial data. There are some small countries where there are certain challenges. For example, Argentina, the society there had asked us as a publishing community to, I believe, only send 500 songs per month for the entirety of the ex-Argentinian society, which was, needless to say, a little bit difficult. I think we got a couple songs in, but that's a very, very rare scenario.
So are you saying that a publishing CMO is interested in the ISRCs, and is there a place to put them in there?
It depends. I think they are now coming to the realization that that is a helpful thing. Generally, if they are a more advanced society, they are using ISRCs to match what the digital service providers are giving them in terms of usage data. So say there are 100 streams on this song by this composition, maybe there's a live performance and the original recording. If they don't have a proper kind of entity resolution mapping system that looks for title matches, if you didn't just put an AKA, parentheses live, that ISRC will help them actually match that automatically. There's also a lot of instances where on one DSP it might be the song, and on another DSP it's song, comma, the. And if they don't have really good matching software on the inside, that ISRC will help them match that to that original composition. So more and more CMOs are using that data to properly administer their catalogs. You're also seeing, in some countries, the radio stations are actually using software that will report data with ISRCs to CMOs. So if they, instead of just writing it down as like literally some intern or some program director saying, oh, I think I played this song and misspelling it, they'll just have ISRCs off of a system be delivered as a usage report, which again, that's where the ISRC really comes in to help match that. So generally, the more advanced CMOs, Western CMOs generally are moving towards that model. Also, the various digital aggregators for pan-European, for example, are generally using ISRCs to match. So ICE Services, for example, is definitely using ISRCs to match. So if you're not delivering your ISRCs with your ISWCs, you are at risk of losing substantial income.
Yeah, and all of us, including Rumblefish and Harry Fox, if you give us an artist name, our goal is to try to track it back to an ISRC so that data is clean. Where in a perfect world, you're delivering an ISWC and an ISRC. You actually don't need anything else, and there's like that data is whatever it is, and those ID numbers create a perfect match.
Historically, if you look back, one of the first wave of DSPs, they didn't have that information, right? They were ripping CDs. They may have been dropping the ISRCs, even if they had them, because it may be from CDs prior to the ISRC standard that they ripped those. I mean, Pandora, one of the, I think, big reasons Pandora acquired Rdio was because they got a database of ISRC to recordings. And whereas historically they just had that great, liner notes data, a lot of that liner notes data just was pre-ISRC. So having that unique identifier for the recordings really changed the world in that sense. Unfortunately, we don't have a one central database for the ISRC, which was a big challenge, I think, with a big reason why we are where we are today. But most DSPs, if you were to launch a DSP now, you would, of course, get all of your digital distributor partners to deliver that with ISRCs. And you probably wouldn't even bother putting up things that didn't have them because it'd be too much work to track them down, and you'd be putting yourself at greater risk.
What I find in our data on the ISRCs, and I don't know who did it, but 3, 4, 5 duplicates to a sound recording now. And the efforts we spend are mapping the ISRC to the original sound recording, not to the compilation it was on or something like that. But do you find that just the same?
I can tell exactly who does it.
Oh, I know who does it.
Dragging down a Excel spreadsheet?
It's the product managers at labels, and it's the various digital distributors. It's also when one label buys another label, they may reissue that because it's easier to do their accounting. And it's easier to track things like campaigns. So they may release an ISRC in one territory, North America, as one ISRC. They may do Europe as another. This is going against the standard. The standard does ask that you use one ISRC globally, and then you maybe use different UPCs or other things to do things like that.
Well, this is where my comment was leading to, is that we used to be able to rely on the ISRC, and now what I'm seeing is through different aggregators, they're modifying ISRCs. Some are, putting letters, in front of the ISRCs or whatever it might be.
No, those are supposed to be there.
No. They're putting their own letters of their company name.
Oh, jeez.
I thought I saw one TC, which I thought was Turks and Caicos.
So if people have any questions or comments, if you want to be get in front of the mic, you'll be documented for posterity.
Hi all, David Weiss from Sonic Scoop here. Thank you for a really enlightening panel. Aaron, you made a joke earlier on about the blockchain. I was just curious to what extent everyone is either incorporating blockchain tools now or expects to be using them in the future.
For us, it's no different than any other format, whether it's CSV or CWR. It's but another format. And to John's point, garbage in, garbage out. It's our responsibility, it's your responsibility to make sure that the data that is compiled is clean and formatted. How it gets, the format or the shape, as it were, that format gets exported is irrelevant.
To the extent we have a working blockchain in the future, will require a huge network effect between all the various powers that be. Until we have a consensus, we are going to be where we are now.
Okay, thank you.
I would also add to that when we analyzed it, we felt the limitations were there from the publisher perspective, and that I would just sense that there's going to be confidentiality agreements which would not allow people to actually provide the information that's needed. And it's taken a while for publishers to even deliver data to folks like us and other companies, so I don't know how quickly they're going to put all their information out there. So I think that's a limitation that, especially from the confidentiality side of things, whether or not you could effectively do it.
Yeah, and we're agnostic pretty much about it. As Aaron says, it's just whatever format that makes the money flow we'll adopt and support. So.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Hi. A long time ago, when I worked at Polygram Records, I was one of the first people who was assigned to take on the task of assigning ISRC codes for the entire company.
Thank you.
And there was a governing rule of how you assign the codes. And I guess over the course of time, we had a problem initially because people weren't following those set rules. They actually had a meeting with the RIA and with all the record companies in the United States about the guidelines for the codes. And essentially, those first letters were supposed to be the record label that owns the masters, as you all know. The second numbers were an issue between recording or release date, depending on what information you had. Subsequently, I wound up going to a meeting in London with the RIA and IFP to discuss the issue about whether the codes should be smart or dumb. In other words, what I just explained being the smart way of doing it, or dumb meaning that the letters and numbers had no significance and you just assigned them so that pirates wouldn't be able to follow. I think there should be a discussion back with RIA and Sound Exchange regarding the rulings on ISRC codes and maybe convening something with the labels, the master owners again, to go over this to maybe reduce the issue of something that should have never happened in the first place, which is duplicate codes. Yeah. I also think that there are bootleggers putting their own ISRC codes on stuff, so it's hard. You have to actually follow back to the original master owner. I don't think, from what I knew at the time when I was first doing this, that there was a discussion on subsequent people, as you said, taking over that catalog. I don't think they were supposed to assign new SICs. They're supposed to keep them for posterity. And the only time you were supposed to change those is when the sound recording changed.
Exactly.
That was specifically it. It was if there was an a cappella version, if there was a totally reissued, remastered, something that made that sound recording distinct.
Well, that becomes the challenge, is every company has the rules. Does the radio edit, is that a different ISRC?
Yes.
Yeah, or
and but those rules need to be, I guess, again, re-announced. Maybe the RIA, Sound Exchange, we can call on them
You
to have
have
something.
two sides. You have the content owners who will likely follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the users of the content who are likely not going to follow them as well. And I think that a lot of the changes also come from there, where they just on their own decide it's convenient. that column or field's not really being used. Let's change it. So that creates some of it.
Even on the content owner side, I mean, I've seen mid-sized labels just be like, we have to do this campaign. This is the only way we're going to be able to track this.
Yeah.
And their marketing goals are more important than paying their content owners.
Well, it was just a thought maybe that we could call upon the RIA at this point and see if we can get something reconvened. They did it before, and then they did it also on a world basis, because the meeting I had in London was Japan, Europe, Canada, everybody was there to discuss this and go over everything. So maybe it's a thought. Okay.
Agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Sean Dunn from Lake House Records. My question goes back to the YouTube and not specifically YouTube, but back to tracking and making sure that the licenses are paid and followed up. So the first question is, how important do each of you feel that it is to have content removed that isn't licensed? Again, if we're talking about I know your position, not very important.
I was trying to be candid.
Yes, I think I got that, and I sort of lean towards your direction. But then my second part of the question would be on who does the responsibility fall to educate the users, and is the issue that we have way too much unlicensed content being flooded into the market every day? Anybody with a computer at their home can make a song and post it, and I don't think that most of the users understand that there's a difference between licensed and unlicensed, and on whom does that responsibility fall to educate them?
You take it?
It's all yours.
No, we feel like as an administrator and as someone that is acting as the advocate on the platform on behalf of publishers and labels, that we have a very unique and delicate responsibility to educate folks that, hey, just because you bought the CD doesn't make it legal for you to share it around the world. But that's a delicate thing, because they are a fan and they're passionate about the music and they want to share it. They paid for it for use in their own home. But I think that, as we say in our office, we sort of handle that with kid gloves, that we're educating them in a way that doesn't put them off or make them feel like they're an idiot for doing that. And then to your point about, where do we draw the line on policing it or not, it's really up to the client. So like I said, some folks, they don't want anything on the platform at all. Some folks want to block it all. They don't even want it monetized. Other folks are, the threshold is 50 views. If it's above 50 views, let's go ahead and monetize it. The Academy wants to only track things. They don't want to block it, and they don't want ads on it, because that's not their business model. They want the user experience to remain pure, as it were. But they want to know the analytics of those views, and so we track it.
Technically, as a copyright owner, you need to be protecting your copyright as much as possible. So to the extent someone's getting away with using your works, may put you at risk as well. So there's also a bit of risk mitigation you have to do as a copyright owner, that you could down the line run into some really big challenges. We have the same set of clients, in the sense that we have people who block, we have people who monetize, we have people who just don't bother until it hits a certain size. Generally, my opinion is, if people are going to use your things online, they're so used to watching ads, just put the ads on. And in general, it's not going to hurt the user experience. A lot more people, if they don't want the ad user experience, they're going to use an ad blocker anyway, or they're going to pay for YouTube Red, or they're going to use one of these other services. And I don't think anyone feels bad about compensating the creator. No one feels bad about that.
But I think, to Aaron's point, though, it's the messaging, right? I mean, obviously, Metallica took a very aggressive stance, and it wasn't a good PR spin, but right, they were exactly right.
A
right?
different
But,
era, though.
Sure.
Very much. I mean, that was. I think the youth of today understands that they're paying for the product via ads, for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think it's so much an education problem as it is a poor user experience for the internal stakeholders and users. It's very difficult to create this information, to track this information, to have consistency from platform to platform. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend Jonathan Taplin's book, Move Fast and Break Things. He goes into great detail about how he did the right thing, and basically getting all the licenses for what was essentially YouTube or Netflix rather, and you went bankrupt. You know, like what is easier is to just get it out there, right? And to Keith's point, to figure it out later. That's what needs to be flipped on its head, and why Sandbox is important.
Just to add to it, and I just thought of it now, that we did twice last year, and I think it was helpful. We got invited to speak at a computer science at 2 different universities in California, and it was interesting how many follow-up questions came from the students about music licensing. So, really what maybe, John and I will go on tour with some other people.
I'm headlining.
And you can speak. I can't sing. But part of the grassroots efforts, and back, I hate to say back in the day in 2000, 2001, but it's true. I think that what might be needed, we've talked to a number of college courses over the last year where we've offered, to come in and chat to the students, because I was trying to hit them right at the developer level. And I think maybe there's a business opportunity if anybody wants to talk to me. But I think if you got to the colleges at least and started introducing into the course curriculum a little bit more about music licensing, and not to keep going on, but my son is at a middle school, and the teacher, was sending out copies of music, and it just killed me. And I didn't tell my son, but I went earlier in the year and let him know that didn't work. But I think the education process is a subtle way to do it, and there could be a way you can kind of find a way in the future to infiltrate into the colleges or the high schools or the middle school and just educate them a little more in a nice way.
And I think a lot of it is also a bit of a U.S. problem too. The notion of licensing is so driver's license in America, and outside of America, to
Totally
get a
right.
TV license is such a normal thing. To go and just say, oh, I got to get TV, BBC, okay, I'll get a TV license. I need one of those, of course, to watch TV. That notion applies to the barbershop. They're like, oh, of course, if I play music here, I got to get a license to play music here. We don't have that culture in America, and I think that because U.S. it tends to be where a lot of these apps are developed, or at least where the successful ones are at present, that's a big challenge for our community.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have 5 minutes, so another question, please.
Neil Donahue from Viacom. Thank you very much. Great panel so far. This might be more unique to our struggle as a broadcaster, and we are working with hundreds of composers throughout the year that are generally delivering for any given episode or series that they work on, like thousands of files, of music files. And one of our big struggles is kind of imbuing the composer at the point of production, of making the music, the importance of creating a kind of template for delivering that data to us, which then, we can add to that data, we can round it out, but the way it works now is that this becomes an additional obligation for them. They work with a production, or they might even be working with, this may apply to an indie music publisher that's working with an artist, and we've had a really hard time convincing these composers that by delivering this data to us, where at least the file name matches the title of the song, that these little types of things, they don't really have the tools to do that.
Yep.
So what they end up having to do is hire an assistant, go to a spreadsheet, and they feel that this is now double delivery, right? That we're now taxing them. And we're trying to explain to them, no, we're actually trying to protect you because we want to police your music. We want to know if someone's using your cues in a product on YouTube, whatever the case may be. So we've been searching high and low for tools on the marketplace that can work with a composer of music to start the data integrity process and deliver that data to us, so that we don't have to ask them to do this twice or 3 times.
I think
No, I just want to, this is a good point. So I actually created an email that's available for everybody, that if you want to send an email to data@exploration.io, there's a packet, there's a handout in everybody's bag, and it's got a catalog metadata template that'll auto-reply to your email now. So it gives you what we call minimum viable data that a composer or writer can input, writer-publisher can input for delivery to Harry Fox, to Crunch, to MRI, to YouTube, whatever, that makes it really easy, and there's some explaining there. So in the absence of catalog management software, that you can use this to organize your catalog.
So we invested in a company called SongSpace that helps a lot of early stage songwriters work on that problem. There's also another company called Choir. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, out of LA, that works specifically in the composer space, that connects supervisors with studios and it kind of wraps that whole chain together. There are new softwares that can help with this, but yeah, I think a defined template is a great place to start.
Right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for all the panelists here.
thank
Please, we're all easy to find. Reach out, check out these companies. Thank you for your time. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, John.